This program is presented by Community Television. A simulcast can be found on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Welcome to the Chippewa Valley Sustainable Future Festival.
Nancy has had a long, passionate life for animals. Dogs, cats, hamsters, ferrets, caged birds, rabbits, llamas, and chickens, as well as sheep and many others have shared her home and her life. She was the founding director of 2 wildlife rehabilitation centers in southeastern Wisconsin and an on-air producer for a public television program called Outdoor Wisconsin for 20 years. Ms. Frank led a wildlife photo tours of Ecuador, the Galapagos Islands, and Kenya. She has recently expanded the residence of her 55-acre farm in Ridgeland to primarily llamas and also to include chickens, sheep, and Dexter cattle. She has always had at least one dog. She is an entertaining and educational public speaker and shares her experiences over the past 10 years of caring for chickens.
Welcome,
you. Nancy.
Thank you very much. Oh my, well, thanks for having me here today. And I guess before I start, I want to sort of know where everybody stands on chickens. How many of you have chickens already? 1, 2, 3, sort of. All right. And you're planning to? Okay, considering it. Based on today? Okay, I just need to know if the pressure's on me or not. Okay, well, this is sort of an introductory talk about chickens, what they need, what many of you may have all of these things covered already. But chickens are marvelous animals, and as every other animal, they need just a couple things. What are they? Food, water, shelter. Yeah, and protection, that's right. Yeah, food, water, and shelter. So if we talk about those 3 things with regard to chickens, of course the first thing we have to think about is the fact that they're a bird. And birds have different needs than mammals and other animals do, not only nutritionally, but also in the way that they eat. You know, as mammals, we all have teeth. We can chew our food. Chickens don't have teeth. They have a beak. They're designed to be able to get away from predators very quickly. Therefore, they can't hang around as a bird, as a regular bird, and eat a long meal. They kind of have to get their eating done and be able to take off. So they eat a lot at once, and it's stored in a thing called a crop, which is it's head of the stomach. It's sort of just below their throat, and it's like a big storage pouch where the food is held, and then it goes slowly into the stomach through the proventriculus, which is an enzymatic stomach that adds enzymes and things to help things dissolve, and then it goes into the gizzard where things are ground up, and that's where the comparable thing to teeth might be. And they have grit that they eat, grinding stones and so on that help to grind the food up when it's in the gizzard. And the gizzard is just a very, very strong muscle. And if you've ever seen the inside of a gizzard that is from a bird that has been slaughtered or something, it's like sandpaper on the inside, and it grinds the food and it makes it more digestible, of course, to go through the rest of the tract. Chickens and other birds also don't have as long a gastrointestinal tract as mammals do, so things have to be absorbed very rapidly. Something that goes in the front end of many birds goes out the back end within a half an hour or an hour's time, where ours, takes a long time. Maybe it's 24 hours to go through that same tract to absorb. So they have to be very efficient in what they absorb from their diet. So in keeping chickens, in a captive situation, we don't give them a lot of choices unless they're able to range freely out and about to pick up insects and pick up the grit and pick up the things that they need. So we have to be able to offer them enough choices that they can get what they need, and to be sure that we're feeding them a diet that's appropriate for them. And of course, many of the processed foods are appropriate for chickens. They've studied them for years in all of the scientific departments at universities to compile something that would be sort of in a crumble form like this, that would have the grains and the nutrition that they need. This is a laying mash, and it's fed to primarily adult hens when they're in laying condition. It gives them enough calcium to produce the eggs and so on. And so this is something that we would feed just as a matter of course, free choice. In most cases, just have it inside the coop. I also feed my chickens scratch grains, because one of the key things about having chickens in captivity is that they get very bored. There's not a lot going on if you maintain them inside a contained coop, and so throwing scratch grains out and maybe hiding them under things and putting them into the the litter in the bottom a little bit, gives them something to peck around and scratch around in and find food, and it keeps them active during the whole course of the day and gives them something to do in addition to just eating. I mentioned that you're always going to have some grit available to them, and if they're in the out of doors, they're going to go along the driveway and get gravel and grit and so on, and include that in their diet. But we offer it to them if they're in a captive situation in our yards, so that they have something that can grind up the scratch grains and the other foods that they're eating appropriately. And then also when hens are, especially when hens are in laying condition, you give them a source of calcium for their eggs, and this is ground up oyster shell. I also crunch up all the eggshells that my chickens lay after I've eaten their yummy yolks, and give them back their ground up eggs. A lot of people say, oh, that just promotes them to eat their own eggs, and I've never had that happen. So I don't think that that's quite true. I think they do learn, some of them do learn to peck into an egg, and they love either raw eggs or any kind of cooked eggs, scrambled eggs, whatever. They will just go crazy for them. So if a hen does start to eat their eggs, there's a couple things that some people say to try to discourage them from doing that, but often it's not something that you can necessarily break them of, because they get such an incredible treat when they get the egg that it's sort of like positive reinforcement for the wrong behavior. And but one of the things that I heard most recently is that you can take some eggs and inject cayenne pepper into the end of them or something, and so they don't get such a tasty treat, and maybe they might learn. But otherwise, those hens may need to be culled from a flock, and if you want the eggs.
Why do they just out of boredom? Or?
Well, they may initially out of boredom, but they get something that they just love, and if you broke into a box that was in your bedroom, and you got whatever your most favorite thing is in the whole world, you'd probably look in that box every day and see if somebody left some more for you in there. And so that's just kind of the theory that they use to go back and get more. Water for chickens, they do consume a reasonable amount of water. It needs to be clean and fresh all the time, available to them. When I have chickens in just a chicken tractor, do we all know what a chicken tractor is? A chicken tractor, there's a million varieties of chicken tractors. Some of them are square, like underneath this table. Some of them are A-frame, kind of like this one that has a house on one end that they can go into. There's a perch inside. That's where they lay their eggs. There may be a nesting box or something on the inside. And then there's an outdoor area that's kind of like their little yard. And every couple times a day, or at least every day, you pick this up. It's got wheels on this end. You can just see the top of the wheel right there. And you roll it to a new piece of grass. They will eat the grass, they mow your grass, they fertilize your grass, and then they're also getting all the bugs out of your yard and kind of keeping your insect population down a little bit. And so it's kind of a nice thing, especially in an urban area. You can then get these delicious eggs that are very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are the healthy kinds of things. And the color of the yolk from an egg, from a chicken that is eating insects and getting a natural diet, is Kodak yellow in comparison to the ones that you get in the store. As those of you that have chickens know, they're delicious. They taste a little different. They've got, for my taste, more substance to the flavor of the eggs as well. So that's a chicken tractor, and this would serve as housing for a chicken during spring, summer, fall. I would probably not keep chickens in something like this during the winter. I would move them to an alternate coop where they could be supplemented with heat, so that to be inside this hut for 3 months, that's asking anybody to be in solitary confinement for that long, would not, in my view, be humane. So I would have them be in some sort of a coop or something else during the winter. And they lay eggs based on the amount of daylight that they get. So what we can do in a larger coop is to elongate the day during the shortest day times of the year in the winter, to be 12 to 14 hours of light by setting a timer with a light that comes on well before sunrise, maybe at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then they will add that, and you slowly add the time to that, and when it gets to be about 12 to 14 hours, they'll start laying eggs on a regular basis, and then you can get it up to about 14 hours a day, and then their sunset is still the same. So if they're coming and going in and out of the coop, you open the coop maybe up at 6 in the morning or whenever you get up and have your cup of coffee, and you open the coop up, they can go outside, be outside, but when the sun starts to set, they'll automatically go back into the coop if you have at-large chickens, or the ability to have at-large chickens. Are most of you inside a residential city area? So you probably have to have confined chickens?
Ours, we have a fence, just a 10 by 20 fence, and a coop attached to it.
Okay, so that's
We
the
got a
area
little
that
bit
they
of
stay
room
in.
for it.
Yeah, okay, but they're in that same
As far as
area all the time.
Yeah, as far as the tractors, do you secure them at night inside of it?
No, well, yes, they're in there all the time, and there's a door on this end and a door on this
But they're
end.
not in a wooden structure at night?
They go in
closed?
here. No, they go in here, and it's been my experience anyway. I've not had any predators get in there because if the chickens were out here at night, I would be way more concerned. And I did have a whole set of meat chickens that I raised in one of these, and at night I would have to go and shoo them into the wooden area because they didn't know enough to go in, because I was concerned that raccoons would take them. I'm not saying that they would not, and it's a good idea to secure them. When you're putting a chicken into a coop or a fenced area, you're not keeping the chickens in so much as you're keeping the predators out. And you want to be sure that you are doing a good job of that, especially in the cities where raccoons don't have a lot to choose from. They're going to be very opportunistic, and chicken is one of their favorites. So that's something that you need to be aware of. When raccoons go to a coop, and other weasels and other animals as well, and they're going to dig under the wall of something to get in, what you can do is, I guess this is probably the best. I have this up here because there's baby chickies in there, and the wheels kept it too far off the ground, and the chickies could get out, so that's why I have that pipe laying there. But if you were to put chicken wire down and out, like an L shape, away from the coop about this far on any standing coop, an animal that's going to try and come in is going to dig right at that junction of where the wall and the ground meet. They're going to try and dig there, and if they run into wire all the way around, they can't get in. They're not going to start digging out 2 feet from the wall and go under, because they don't think that way. They're going to try and get in right at that junction. So an L-shaped piece of anything on the outside of any structure will keep the predators away, and let the grass grow through it, and they can't, they can't lift it up and get under it in any way. So that's something to think about.
Do you have any, is there like a fencing or netting underneath on the bottom of that tractor?
If I were to have chickens in here, I don't use this because my chickens at my farm are at large, and they go into the barn or into another structure coop, kind of like your coop, except they can go anywhere they want on the farm. I sell these, and I have one of these for sale if anybody's interested. I would recommend that there's a place that you roll it to at night that has just what you're suggesting.
Okay, so they can't get underneath.
Correct. Yeah, that would be a good thing in a city to have. So fresh water, this is one style of water delivery system. You can use a regular bowl. My experience is that if you've got a bowl that's a round bowl, they're going to poop in it at some point or another. They're going to either sit on the edge, tip it over, dump it out, poop in it if they're sitting backwards on it. And so if I'm using a water system that is a bowl, I'll often use a dog dish that is one of the ones that can't tip, that's got the straight sides down and then the dish, so that they can't have a problem. But these are really nice, especially for young birds and chicks. It keeps fresh water coming all day long, and they can't get their butts in here too much to poop into their own water, so that's very helpful. And the similar one for food, of course, it's a feeding down system for the chick food or chicken laying mash for them to eat. And it's something that they can't get their feet in to dump it out very easily. They can a little bit, but not so much. And when chickens eat, they often want to use their feet and dig and dig and dig. And if you have it again in a bowl, the bowl will be empty. All the food will be outside. And if it rains, it's all muddy and messy and goopy all right away. So that's something that I kind of like to have a feeder system like this. They also have large ones that are big around, that have the same holes and that have the same water tray for the birds. Have any of you ever had little chicks? Are you thinking about raising little chicks?
We started.
You started that way. Okay, all right. A lot of different things you want to think about when you have little chicks. If they get into a draft, it can be very bad for them. They can catch colds very easily when they're just very tiny. They would in nature be being brooded by their mom, and their mom's temperature is about 107 degrees, that brood patch. So the temperature under the hen is about at least 100 or so at any given time if they're over under her wings or something. So if they are out there, they're being shielded from breezes and so on, and also they're being kept very warm. If they get cold, if they get wet in a watering dish, if they fall in a watering dish, they have a really hard time drying off unless they're at a nice warm temperature without the breezes in there. So that's one of the things that I do for a waterer like this, because it's about a half an inch or so deep, and if they're very little, they're almost like little ping pong balls on legs. If they fall into the water or get wet, I often put marbles or stones into the water tray here so that there's water, where the marbles come together. It's round like this, and there's water in between, just in those tiny little spaces, and enough for them to get their beaks into, but they can't fall in any way. So they can just get the water, and then after a day or two, when they figure out what's going on, they don't need that anymore. But that's what I do for little chicks. Let's see, we've talked about the shelter. I don't have a lot of time. I could talk I can just go on talking forever. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, because we'll just go on. Are any of you think you have a full-time coop? Others of you, do you have plans for full-time coops at all? There are some references that are available, some really excellent ones. This one has, I think it's 45 different buildings and different coop styles in here. Some of them are very, very simple, and some of them look like Swiss chalets. So I will leave these books up here, and you can take a peek at them. I also have a list of the references that I've brought with me today that I will just let you take one of those and pass them around if you want to do that. In terms of biology, we have kind of messed with chickens. Regular birds, wild birds, don't lay eggs generally unless they are doing it for reproductive reasons. And not that chickens aren't, but they will do it without reproductive reasons, and it takes a tremendous amount of energy for them to lay eggs. And so we've kind of messed with them, and we've genetically engineered them, I suppose you could say, to continually lay eggs all year long based on the light. They don't need a rooster in order to lay eggs. And so most of the eggs that we eat, that we buy from the store, are not fertilized eggs, but they continue to produce them all the time. Are any of you interested in the process of egg making within the body of the chicken, or not? Some people are, some people aren't. Doesn't matter either way.
I saw a nice poster explaining it.
You did see a poster? Okay, all right. I've had people ask me, they say, I just feel really stupid. When does the chicken egg get fertilized? And you don't necessarily, it's not really something that you can know right off if you're not thinking about it or if you don't understand it. But the egg is fertilized within the chicken. She is designed, if you've ever dissected a chicken, they have every egg on this little sort of a grapevine branch looking thing that they're ever going to lay in their lifetime. And it's all inside them. There's a kind of an egg that's ready to be encased in an egg, and then there's a little smaller one, a little smaller one, a little smaller one, and they get to be just a little dot of yolk, and then they kind of disappear. And every time that one is ovulating or taking a yolk and dropping it off, and then it goes on down and it gets the white casing around it, and it gets that membrane and the amniotic, blah, 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 all that stuff, and eventually it gets the shell put on it, the very last thing, and then it's laid. Well, then the next one is, of course, coming up the track, and the yolk is getting bigger, and that's the next one that's going to come around the track. They lay an egg about every 18 hours, and so you get about an egg or a day and a half per egg, approximately, and not a day and a half. 12 hours plus 6, a day plus 6 hours, and so some of them will be laid in the morning, and some will be laid at night. I have one of my chickens. I brought one of my hens with me, and she laid an egg in here since I collected her up last night. She's one of my fairly friendly girls, and usually she'll just sit right on my, come on, honey, sit on my hands, but she's, there you go. You just sit there for me? Yeah, no, just sit there. All right, you can walk around, all right? She's never had a leash on before on her legs, so she's just not good. Come on, honey. But I walk her around quite a bit. Hey, you. Come on. Just move this way. There we go. This is Sonia. And she's a little Minorca. Here's the egg that she laid for me since last night. She's been walking around with a little manure on it. Oh well. So she lays little small eggs, and she just had 11 chicks hatch out, and they are now teenagers, and some of them are a little bigger than she is because she was bred with an Oricana, who's a big rooster. But she's a pretty girl.
How soon? Our chicks were born in April, and we're wondering when we could maybe expect.
When they're about 5 months old, 5 to 6 months old.
So maybe next month or.
Ours just started. We got ours in April too, and they just started. this week.
Okay, and it sometimes depends on the breed. Some of them are I think the leghorns are a faster producing bird. They mature a little bit faster, and some of the other breeds are a little slower in developing the egg laying. Well, you're being very good now.
Yeah, is that kind of dependent on, like you said, the sunlight that they get too?
Yes, yeah, and the length of day that you keep in the coop.
So why do we get some have double yolks?
That's just about, if two of them drop off at the same time, it's like
Okay.
twins in people. If two eggs drop off at the same time,
Okay.
you got twins.
So are some chickens just more done,
Some
they'll do it more
do
often?
produce more often,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
You,
we have a
get
few of
doubles
those,
from
yeah.
them? And it's really fun that eggs are often different colors by the different breeds. Well, they are for different breeds. The Minorcas have these sort of creamy white eggs. The Oricanas are the ones that give you Easter eggs. Sometimes they have sort of a bluish green egg, sometimes sort of a pinkish egg. And I used to get a whole basket full of eggs of all my different. I've Bardrocks, I've got a Black Star, I've got a Red Star, I've got an Australorp, I've got all these different ones. And I'd bring a basket of eggs in the house. It was just like Easter, They're all different colors. I took some pictures of them. They're so pretty. But that's kind of a fun part. I love going out and collecting eggs. For some reason, there's just something very basic and natural about that for me, and I love going out and looking for them. But they hide. Mine that are at large don't always go back to the coop to lay. And as soon as you start taking eggs consistently from one nest, they go, oh, well, this isn't working. I'm not getting a whole clutch of eggs. I'm going to put it somewhere else. And then you have to go find the nest. One of the things that I do that keeps them a little longer staying with one nest is I replace the eggs with golf balls. When I take eggs, I put golf balls in. And some people use wooden eggs that are the same shape as eggs. And they seem to lay in there a little bit longer before they abandon their nest. Finally, they figure out those aren't eggs, and they leave anyway. But I had a young hen that just sat on golf balls. She went broody, which means that they're going to try and hatch the eggs out, on golf balls, and she sat on them for 6 weeks. And I took them out after 4 weeks because that's when they're supposed to be done. And she sat there and sat there and sat there and just was trying so hard to hatch chickens out of those golf balls. But she finally now has abandoned it, and she's gone back to the roost at night, which is good.
They say when the hens go broody, they just want to sit on their eggs.
Yeah, and what they do, it's a hormonal change, and what happens is that instead of doing their daily routine, they will go and sit on a nest, and it's about usually 23 or 4 days for a chicken, between 21 and 23 days about. For chickens. With ducks, it's about 28 days, a little longer for them. But they stay on the nest most of the time. They can get off and go eat, and they don't want to mess their nest, soil their nest, and so they don't defecate in the nest. They defecate elsewhere for that time, which seems kind of amazing because you can't potty train them at any other time except then. But they'll sit tight pretty much for that time, and they almost go into sort of a torpor. I mean, I can go in and put my hands under them if you go slowly, and they just kind of go, they don't really want to move off the nest, and they just stay there until they hatch out the babies. What's interesting about many different kinds of birds are called altricial birds, like robins and hawks and owls and so on. And the bird will go into a nest and lay an egg and then sit on that egg. And then 18 hours later, they'll lay another egg. 18 hours later, they'll lay another egg, and they'll keep those warm. And so when they start to hatch, that first one will hatch first, and then the second one, and then the third one. And with chickens, they lay an egg, and they leave the nest, let it get cold, come back whenever they're going to do the next one, lay an egg, they let it get cold. They do that until they have 12 or 14 eggs, whatever their clutch is going to be if you leave the eggs there. And then they'll come back and sit on it, and all the eggs hatch within 24 hours of one another. And when you think about it, why would that be important for a wild bird? Not so much for the chickens, but for a wild bird, why would that be important that some birds, they would hatch 1, 2, 3, and they'd have one that's 3 days old and 2 days old and 1 day old. And chickens, they'd all be the same age, or ducks or pheasants or quail or any of those precocial kinds of birds. You think about that? Any ideas?
Well, I was going to say, like your Chihuahuas or whatever, those, it's going to be a food supply thing probably, so the oldest are going to get, you know.
That's
and
right.
now I don't know, I suppose there, you want them all the same age, so if you're going to be moving them around, they can all keep up.
Yeah, the precocial birds, their food supply is insects when they're young. And so they can get out of their egg, and within 24 hours, they have part of their yolk sac contained still in them when they're hatched from the egg. So they've got about 24 hours food supply to learn how to eat and learn how to gather food. But their food supply is insects. And so there's plenty of insects for 12 babies to go with their mom and find them. That's not going to be a problem. If, for instance, in the case of an owl, the rabbit population, the mouse population, and so on dies off, they've got one youngster that's much bigger. It's going to be much more competitive for the amount of food. The little ones may die, but they won't have 3 weakling owlets. They'll have one really strong one, and the others may die. But, you know, in terms of the survival thing, that's what they want, is they want to have healthy babies that are going to go on and produce. So that's the deal with the difference between altricial and precocial birds. Parasites for chickens. There are a couple things, not so much parasites, but I use diatomaceous earth a lot in all my animals. And diatomaceous earth, diatoms are little tiny, they're not protozoans, they're not crustaceans either. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're very, very minute little animals that live in the ocean, and they have a calcium skeleton, an exoskeleton that's very sharp. They have like very sharp glass-like edges on them. And so when these birds eat that or have it in their feathers and they're moving around, it grinds up the bodies of the fleas or the feather mites or that kind of thing. And so it kills them without using medications to worm them. So that's something I put in their dust baths if I know that they create dust baths out in their area. They have a sand, like a little sand pit, or you can create one in a bowl. You put some fine sand in there, and they'll be in there, wiggle around like that, and they get it in between all their feathers, and they look like Pigpen when they come out. They shake their feathers, and there's like this cloud of smoke that comes off with all the dust. So if you put some diatomaceous earth in there, that will help them to keep the exoparasite load down. There are also parasites called scaly leg mites, and you'll see, my birds don't have it, but on the leg where it's nice and smooth and the scales go right into one another, you get this sort of crusty looking stuff that's got kind of little pock marks in it, and it looks like there's kind of a, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of like a coral around their leg sort of, and that's the housing that the scaly leg mites have built up. And they live and they lay their eggs in the perches that are in the coop, and they'll drown in any kind of an oil. And so you can paint the perch with mineral oil, paint the legs of the birds with mineral oil, and that will kill off those mites. And or if you just change the perch out, if it's I often use pieces of tree limbs and just nail them onto a couple of perch bases, and then I can just take them out. They don't cost me anything to buy, and it gives the birds the other thing that is really nice about using natural branches for perches is that the bottoms of their feet get exercised. If you have a dowel that's an inch or 2 inches in diameter or whatever it is, and they're constantly sitting on that same perch, if it's not just the right size for the different size feet that the birds have, it's always rubbing on the same place on their foot. But if you have something that's got a natural rough surface on it, there's going to be knobs and things, and they're going to get some exercise on their feet sitting on the perch in different places. So I think that's very important. When I did wildlife rehabilitation, that was incredibly important for the owls and hawks. If they got what was called bumblefoot, it was a mess to clean up. It's an infection that gets into the bone of their feet, and it's really tough. And of course, an owl, if it doesn't have its feet to kill with, it starves. So it's really important in that case. But these guys they limp, and you feel sorry for them when they have sore feet. Caring for the feet. Often, if you have them in an area where there's not rocks and things that will file down their toenails, and their toenails get very, very long. Hers are not really horrible. You can see them just a little bit. You can use a file and coat them down. You just turn them on their back. They don't like it very much. But you can turn them on their back and file. Oh, you're stressing out, oh, baby. Yeah, you don't know all about these people. And also, if their beaks get too long, you can leave them something to what's called coping their beak. And you've seen birds when they'll pick something up and they kind of do this when they're brushing their beak off on something. And that little bit of grit or something that might be in the sand when they're doing that files and keeps their beak sharp and able so that the bottom beak meets the top beak. And again, if you see one that's way overgrown and the bottom beak is back here and the front beak is way out here, you can take, this is a stained glass file, and I like it because it's rounded on the outside, and so it gives, I file my nose here, it gives a nice surface that you can really figure out. If you're using a flat one, sometimes you get because their beak is not absolutely a straight line, you can get a filed area that's too thin there, and that can cause a weakness. But if you're using this side, you can kind of be very careful about how you go up and down the whole side of the beak and keep it sharp and straight. And again, that's more important for owls and hawks than it is with chickens, because they have to be able to rip their prey apart, and if their beaks don't match and when they're in captivity, we have to be careful about that. When you're giving medicine to a chicken, their beak, even if they have it closed, if you can get medicine, there's a little part of, I don't know if she'll let me even touch it right back here, but right back here, you see this little lip right there? She doesn't like that very much. If I need to get medicine into her, I can put a drop of liquid out kind of on the end of this and run it along the beak, and if you get it back into that crevice and let it kind of sit there, somehow, I don't know how, but in their respiration, it gets pulled inside, and then they go, and when they go, you go a little bit more, and then it goes in, and it kind of goes right down into their throat. Birds don't have an epiglottis like we do. They can't close off their respiratory tract. If you open their mouth and squirt medication in, the opening to their trachea is right behind their tongue, and it's wide open. And if stuff goes in there, it goes into their lungs. They can get foreign body pneumonia, and it can kill them. So you always want them to be able to swallow medication, and so if you can run it down, even if you open their mouth, you still put it in the front part of their beak and hold it up so that it runs under their tongue, and then you let the beak go so that they can swallow it. That's a really important piece that a lot of people don't really know about. If you need to tube feed a chicken, the crop that I mentioned is right here, and you can get like a catheter, a flexible catheter from a veterinarian or something, and it hooks right on the end of a syringe, and you can slide the tube down, and you go down their right hand side about this far so that you get past the trachea and into and you can't miss other than that. People are really afraid sometimes to tube feed birds because they think, oh, what if it goes in their lungs? Well, if you miss that hole, which you can see, and it goes beyond and it goes down the right side and it's got a little oil on it or something, then you can deposit, you could probably put about the equivalent of what I see here is 8 cc's or so into her several times a day, just if she's out very low energy and needs some extra support if she's really sick. So, let's see, questions. I don't know what time it is, and I know I'm limited on time, so what time is it?
It's about 3 minutes to 5.
Oh, well, I'm actually over. Well, that's okay. Questions? You seem to be staying here, and I'd be happy to stay as long as you want me to yabber at you.
Do you feed yours organic foods, or do you try to go that route?
I think it's an excellent thing to do for people that have contained birds particularly. Since the rest of my farm isn't organic, I don't know if it is necessarily good for me. The eggs will be the higher quality. If you're doing meat birds, the meat will be higher quality. We all know, I think, about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. There have been a lot of studies that in mice and so on, that within 2 or 3 generations they're seeing birth defects. And we're consuming all that stuff too, whether we're eating GMO corn, whether we're eating chickens that were fed GMO, or egg. I'm not sure about eggs. I don't know what their body products, if they process that stuff through them. But because my pens are completely open and I feed inside the pens, most of my food goes to the sparrows, quite frankly, because the chickens are more interested in eating the natural stuff outside. So I don't know quite what to tell you on that. Do you sell your eggs?
No.
Okay. Because if you feed organic food, you can charge way more for your eggs if that's what they're eating. I know some people are paying as much as $3 and $4 for organic eggs a dozen. I sell mine for $2 1/4, and they're not organic, but they're farm fresh, and I only supply a couple of families with.
Is there any harm to feeding them table scraps? Because
No,
we give
they
them a lot of
love
table
love
through
table
weeds from our
scraps.
garden and just
Perfect. They'll eat what they want to eat, what they need to eat. They love meat, you know, and people go, meat? You give them meat scraps? And it's like, yeah, all the insects are meat. I had a handful of, I also have lambs at my farm, and I had some kind of old lamb burger in my freezer. And so I kind of scraped off the freezer burn part of it before I cooked it, and I just threw it outside. And my chickens, I don't know, they don't have a sense of smell, I don't think. But they could tell from the time it left my hand to the time it hit the ground, they were on it. And if I throw fruits and stuff out, they kind of come and, you know, come running over and look at it and, oh, okay, we'll peck at this. But that meat, honest to goodness, they were just on it like gangbusters. They just love meat. I give them all sorts of different kinds of scraps. Yeah, and they'll pick through it. They don't like onions very much. And I had a house chicken for a while, and it was really interesting to me that I could put two things down that were the exact same color, like Colby cheese and winter squash, and cheese every time. 100% of the time, right on the cheese, same color, same shape of whatever. But she knew from a distance she'd run over the cheese and eat it. So I don't know quite what to make of that. But I had her in my house because she went into stress molt in December and dropped most of her feathers, and so she was cold, and so I brought her in. And what a personality! She actually spent 3 winters in my house because she would come in. And she never went on a table, a chair. She was the sweetest lady. She was on the floor all the time, except when she went up on the bookshelf to roost. That was her roost in the front hallway. That was it. But I taught her little tricks. They started doing, do you know what clicker training is? Does anybody know what that is? Where you click and reward, click and reward. They started learning about that with chickens. I read about that and went, well, if they start learning with chickens, Blanca will learn. And she picked it up like that. I mean, simple tricks. I'd put a piece of black paper on the floor and a piece of white paper. And if she picked the white paper, she got a treat. If she picked the black paper, nothing happened. So I could move them all over the place. I'd put the black one right in front of her and the white one over there, and she'd look around and she'd peck, where's my treat? I mean, it was amazing. And she'd knock little bottles over, and where's my treat? And she'd ring a little bell, and where's my treat? You know, it was really fun. I had a good time with her, but I'm a little crazy, so that's okay. I allow myself just that much craziness sometimes. Let's see. Boredom. Chickens get bored. I think I told you about that. And there are some things that you can do to help them with that. Not only the scratch screens. I hang CD discs in my coop so that they're out just a little bit out of the reach. Sometimes they jump up and hit them, you know, and spin them around. The light flashes off and it helps just to have a little bit of stimulation. You can put some greens up in not a nice chicken basket like this one, but something like a wire basket, and hang it up so that they have to jump up to get the little greens that are hanging out of it. So they kind of work at that all day, and it gives their brain something to do. You can put furniture in their coop. Put a straw bale over there, and and the next day it's over here, and maybe make a little tunnel out of a couple of straw bales, or put a little one of those culvert kind of tubes, you know, those round PVC kind of things, and they'll run through them. And it also allows them to sort of get away from each other. If one of them is being feather pecked, they have places to go behind things. I have kennel cabs in one of my coops for their nesting boxes, and so I move them out away from the wall. So there's about a 8-inch runway that goes behind the coops in the corner, and some of them zoom in there and get chased in there or not, or whatever. But they have places to go in their coop, so that kind of helps with the whole boredom thing. You can hide some of their food under different things, and they'll learn to flip things over to find food, and make it a little harder to get.
Can you talk a little bit about keeping them in the winter?
Sure. I have 2 coops. I keep a heat lamp on in there. It's one of those that keeps the it provides them a warm spot in the coop, but it doesn't heat the whole coop. They can choose to be in that spotlight sort of, and it's one that they don't consider as light as daylight, so it doesn't go on and off, it just stays on. And then I have the light bulb that goes on and off that does the daylight as well. You need to insulate a coop, but be aware that if you insulate a coop, don't do it with the regular insulation and think that that's going to solve your problem, because they eat it. And boy, do they eat it. They go after it and they just decimate the siding. So if you're going to use insulation, put something else more solid on it, like plywood or cardboard. They'll also decimate. But I've decided that those grain bags, those slippery grain bags Farm and Fleet sells all their grains, the Sprout products in that. They're like almost like tarp material. And I've decided I'm going to staple gun that on there next time, because I don't think they can get through that to get to and I have a lot of them. And I started looking at them in my garage the other day and thinking, you know, those are between $10 and $15 a piece. I must be really rich. I've spent a lot of money on food lately. But anyway, that's something that they can do. Does that answer your question? They need to have more space in the winter than if they're out and running around all summer. They can come into a fairly small place, stay for the night, and then head out again in the summertime. They've got a lot more options. In the winter, they're not going to go out. There's not much out there for them in the snow. There's no food out there. There's no, not going on. So they're going to be in the coop. So I like to leave at least like 3 square feet per bird at least in the coop so they can move around and have some personal space without being stressed by each other. Yeah. And different books will give you different numbers for their own space.
Can you still let the chickens out during the day in the winter to
You can.
exercise?
You can if you want to. They don't usually go out. They just choose not to. I have one coop that has a dog kennel attached to it, and they can go up the little ramp and down and go out into that dog kennel outside. There's hardly ever a track out there all winter long. So I just figure they probably don't need that. And the predators are hungrier in the winter, so I want to make sure that they're safe as well.
You know foxes can climb fences?
Gray foxes can climb. I don't know that they can go straight up. Red foxes don't usually climb, but gray fox do. Raccoons are your biggest problem. Raccoons and weasels, mink and weasels. Those are the ones that, and if you're in the southwestern part of the state, they have snakes too. Rattlesnakes will eat chickens as well. Get into the coop. Oh, bloop! What a good girl. Missed the table. Let's see, foxes. Yeah, if you raccoon-proof something, then it's going to keep everybody out pretty much. Whenever I set up a coop, I take like a what is that? About 3 feet of chicken wire. I'll lay that on the ground, and then I'll build my upright fence in the middle of that 3-foot stretch, so that when the chickens are digging around, they don't make a hole. They can make a hole big enough to get out. If you just put a dog kennel fence up and if you don't bury it, you can also bury it 6 inches or so. But I just put chicken wire this way, and then I put my fence this way, and they can't get out. And like I said, then the other animals can't get in because there's that L-shaped thing. Sorry, sweetie.
Our
You
coop
can't
is
go.
in
You're
the.
supposed to have that on both your feet, not just one foot. What's going on? Come on. You want to go back in your coop? You've been out long enough. I had another. These are Jess's, by the way, that you use for birds of prey, and I just fashioned them for her today, so that for that reason, so that she wouldn't get away. Here you go, bud. You want to go back in there? I'll even give you your egg back if you want it. I don't think you're probably looking for an egg, but there you go. There. Other questions that you have? This is one of my coops, when I have the perches. You can pass that around if you want to. Now, the top one is her with her babies. Now they're teenagers, but they were just chicks when that was taken.
How old is she?
How old is she? I got her as an adult probably 4 years ago, 3 years ago at least. So she's relatively old. If you're into production, egg production, your first year is going to be the pullet stage. After they're pullets, and that first year is when they're going to produce the most eggs. Then they slow down a little bit. But these Minorcas, I tell you, although those eggs are smaller, they produce them like wildfire. I mean, they're regular every day for 200 some days. It's just amazing to me. So, and this is the chicken tractor, as I mentioned, and if you want to know more about that, I'd be happy to let you know. There's a kit. It isn't a kit. It's a friend of mine made the kit and was producing them for a while. But
How many chickens would you put in, like adult chickens would you put in?
this one is
comfortably?
smaller. I would put 2 hens in this one. It's got about I think it's got a 4 by 4 foot. Yeah, I think that's a 4 by 4 foot yard area and a 2.5 foot floor space area in the little hut. And so there are other ones. My neighbor has one that's about as big as this table, but higher. And it's very long, it's 10, and she's got the wheels on one end that are on sort of a lever, and she steps on it, and the wheels come up and lifts it off the ground, and then she's got one of those boat trailer pullers, and so she put a piece of 2x4 across the other end with a hole in the bottom, and she goes under there with that boat puller, and away they go, and she can roll it away very easily. So it's not, even though it's large, it's very mobile for her. So. I also have sheep, but they don't have anything to do with the chickens. But I'll let you see my sheepies. I have lamb, I have wool, I have Shetlands, I have Icelandics, and I have Dorsets. So if anybody's interested in sheepies or Dexter cattle, which is a grass-fed Irish heritage variety of beef, I'd be happy to talk to you about those as well.
What the cattle you said are?
Dexter cattle, Irish heritage variety, smaller format, meat and milk both. Perfect family cow, in my estimation. They provide about maybe 300 or so pounds of meat. It's about 60% of their body weight is meat, so it's about enough for a family for a whole year. And they produce about 1.5 gallons of milk a day, so it's about the right amount for milk and butter and whatnot for a family that's doing that stuff all in their family. And they're gentle animals, and they're very hardy, and they easy birthers and all sorts of things. Yeah. Any other questions that I can answer for you?
One quick
Yes.
question. Do you have any problems introducing new chickens or chicks into your?
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are a couple things that you can do. I'm glad you asked that because that's a really good question. What I usually do is either put the kennel cab like this with the bird that I'm going to introduce, and I usually try and introduce more than one at a time, so I'd try and have 2 or 3 hens that I'm moving into another group, and I'd either put them in the kennel cab, leave them in there for a couple of days so that the others can get to know them, and then not open it until everybody's gone to roost at night, then open the door and leave and let them come out at their own pace, or put them on the roost at night in the dark when everybody's kind of saying, oh yeah, all right, you're in here too again, what are you doing in here, I don't care, and then they wake up in the morning and everybody's on the roost and everybody seems to get along. Chicks, I would do the slow release and keep them in there for quite a while and give them places to hide and get away from those biddies, because those girls will take them to task and sometimes kill them if they can. Yeah. Unless they're with their mom. Their mom will keep them protected pretty well. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thanks. Feel free to come up and take a look at what you want. My business cards are here. If you want to contact me for any reason, certainly feel free. I love to have people come visit me at my farm, so if you'd like to come visit, that's great. If you want any other information that I might send out, just put your name on the list. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This program was recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television. Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you'd like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.